Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 12th Wandsworth Coronavirus Business Forum. Today we have Jonathan Cook, Deputy Leader for Wandsworth Council, who will be addressing you, and then Graham Russell will be updating us on the discretionary grant fund. The last date for that, remember, is tomorrow, the 18th. We will then be focusing, our theme this week is mental health. Now, mental health is such a vast area, and it covers so much. So we're not going to try and cover all of it, but we just want to really highlight some of the issues that we need to be considering in our return to work. So we'll be having a personal story from Richard Hodson, who's been on these forums regularly. Richard's an insurance broker. Chris Dodd will be talking from South Thames College on some of the training opportunities that are available to help businesses cope with the demand that there will be for staff, customers, and themselves around mental health. And then Alex Cunningham will be taking us through a short exercise to highlight some of the issues that we need to be looking out for. So today we've had a few technical issues. I'm on a laptop because the computer's crashed. But these are the things we have to cope with nowadays. So if there are any issues, we'll try and rectify them as soon as possible. But with that, I'm going to ask Jonathan Cook to address you. Jonathan, can I bring you in?
Okay, thank you, Steve. Morning, everyone. Thank you, Steve, for organising as ever. I just thought I'd give a quick update on all the sort of the business front rather than the sort of the broader council picture this week. It's been quite a significant week already. Of course, Monday was the reopening for non-essential retail, and we were very pleased to be able to host the Minister for London, Paul Scully, on Northcote Road early on Monday morning. So it's great to have that profile for the borough, and there was TV there and everything. And I think that was prompted by a superb video which the Clapham Junction bid have done, and it really sort of captures, I think, a sense of the challenge for sure that all the businesses are facing, but also a sense of optimism, and that had clearly been noticed by the Minister's office, and they thought, right, let's get down there and talk to some of these people. And what I think it did very well was reinforce this sort of sense of identity about the place, that what's special about that particular locality. And that's a message we're trying to reinforce right across the borough, in all of the town centres and localities that people identify with, from Thursdown to Nine Elms, Putney to Balham, all over the borough. We're very lucky in having those places that people very much consider their patch. I think it's one of the positives to come out of this situation is that we hopefully will see a resurgence of people using their local shops and just keeping their lives much more local. So one of the practical things we've done is prepare a whole set of pavement stickers, all to do with the social distancing, of course, but themed to the locality, and they're quite fun. And so they're all over Northcote Road now, and they were filmed on Monday. So we've done those for loads of places all over the borough. We'll continue to do that. We're particularly looking ahead now to 4th of July, which is another key staging date, with some reopening of hospitality. So there's a lot of work to be done to support businesses as they prepare for that. We're already seeing a taste of that, of course, with bars that have an off license, serving customers, gets particularly busy at weekends, brings all sorts of challenges for us and the police and the cleaning contractors. It is quite literally a bit messy at times, but we're really keen to see these businesses thrive. So it's that sort of tricky balance, and we're working really hard to get that right. So that's the the business is coming back to life, which is great to see, and we'll just do everything we possibly can to encourage and manage that. On other things, the Workmatch job brokerage is extremely busy. Encourage anyone to use that if they can see a reason for doing so. It's really very effective at placing people in employment. It's been really very busy in the last few weeks. On the grant front, we've pretty much sort of reached, we think, probably a conclusion now on the business rate based grant system. Almost, Mr. Russell will be able to update with the very latest, almost 52 million distributed to well over 3,200 businesses. Still one or two coming in, which is interesting. And we're now probably at least 8 weeks since that scheme was launched, and there are still some applications coming in. So what that tells us is, however much effort we put into communication, there are still going to be some people, for perfectly good reasons, who just don't hear about it. So we've really got to keep up the communications, which leads on neatly to the discretionary grant scheme, which we launched beginning of last week, and the deadline for applications is Friday. Again, Mr. Russell will have the latest, but I'm relieved to say that so far we've not been inundated. It was very difficult to judge whether that would happen, because we're in uncharted territory here, and of course, were that to happen, there'd be, we've got a fixed pot, there'd be less money to go around. So it looks fairly manageable at the moment, but obviously anyone who might be eligible, we would encourage to apply. So Friday's the deadline for that. All the details are on the website. So I think that is probably it from me in terms of the updates, what we're doing for business, the business supports, and really just the focus of everything we're doing now is around recovery, be that the very immediate challenges that are touched on, and obviously the longer term, thinking of the months ahead. So, for example, talking to TfL about how we can create areas that are much more friendly to pedestrians rather than cars, and drive up footfall for all of the town centres. So we're working on that with TfL, and hopefully we'll be able to say a bit more about that in the next few days, about what we'll be able to do. So I'll leave it there. I'm very happy to take any questions later, Steve.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jonathan. I guess we're just getting through this first stage of recovery and shops opening, and then the next stage will be around the 4th of July, when we're hoping that more leisure will be opening. And we're getting a lot of questions from some of the pubs and restaurants about guidelines, etc. Have you heard of any news about when these might be coming out from government?
Yeah, I mean, things are coming out all the time. Mr. Diamond will probably have the absolute latest. We've got a webinar planned, which is specifically aimed at giving the latest guidance to all of those businesses. But of course, on a more informal basis, we're talking to lots all the time. That's a bit of a practical challenge for us, because of course we're talking about hundreds, if not thousands, of businesses. So we'd encourage any business that is wanting to know about that to sign up for the webinar, which we've got coming up. And Mr. Diamond will know more about that. That's being organised by the Council's Economic Development Office.
All right, lovely. Thank you very much, Jonathan. Before I bring you on, Graham, I just wanted to show everyone the latest copy of Business Connections, which should be on members and key stakeholders' desks today. The magazine's also available online, so if anyone would like a copy, just drop me an email, steve@wandsworthchamber.org. The magazine is actually full of positive messages from the leader, from Jonathan, but also some great articles on business resilience and guidelines for retail openings, etc. So have a read, and thank you to everyone for contributing to that. So with that, Graham, could I ask you to unmute yourself?
Thanks, Steve. Good morning, everybody. I'll just add a little bit of detail to what Councillor Cook said. So the small business and retail relief schemes, 3,295 businesses have been paid a total of £51.505 million. The scheme remains open. Applications are trickling in. We're only doing one run a week now on a Friday because it's down to ones and twos, but so it does remain open. And if, as I say every week, if you do know anybody who hasn't applied and you think they're eligible, get them to go to the website. Of more immediate interest, I guess, will be the discretionary grant scheme. We've had 266 applications so far for that. As Councillor Cook said, that's good in one sense that we haven't been totally inundated. I have to say it's probably slightly less than we thought we would get. Very interestingly, not all of the market traders seem to have applied, which is not something I was expecting to see. So if there's any reason for that, perhaps Mr. Diamond can chivvy them along a bit, because we don't want to run out of time. Once all of the applications are in and it's closed, what we'll do is look at the applications. We're processing them as we go along as much as we can. So we're hoping it won't take too long to get everything finished, and we can then take some decisions about the amounts that we paid out and get those payments made as soon as possible.
Graham, thank you for that. Are there many of the first phase of grants outstanding still, or are we pretty much up to date on those?
Right, well, that's about 87% of the number of businesses that we estimated were eligible, but the problem with that is we don't know how accurate our estimate was.
Okay.
Because the council didn't hold information on all the businesses, particularly the ones that were in receipt of small business rate relief, because there's no reason for them to give us their details because they don't pay anything. So we had to make a broad estimate. So we don't think there's too many out there. Okay. And as Councillor Cook said, we've done lots of publicity around it, and I'm not sure what else we can do. We did try and make contact with every single business on our list that hadn't applied, and we got about 20% return from those. So I'm not really sure there's much more the council can do on those, but it's approaching 90%, so that's not too bad. It's not too far out with the London averages either.
We've got a question in there from Baljinder, who says he hasn't received his grant yet. So, and he's asking for your email. So perhaps you could just have a quick look into that one whilst we're on this call, and maybe have an answer for Baljinder. I guess the other question is this discretionary grant is absolutely crucial, not just for market traders, but for a lot of businesses. The grant deadline is Friday. I thought it was the 18th, but it's the 19th, is it?
It's actually the close of play tomorrow, but we are thinking about extending it, because that does appear to have confused some people. Right.
Okay. So news of that would be appreciated.
Yeah, we'll put that on the website if we do.
Okay. And I would just ask everyone attending this call, and we'll certainly be broadcasting it, to broadcast the fact that the discretionary grant is open, the closing date is imminent, and especially for market traders, they probably have a small community of their own, so actually get them to be made aware of this and to make the application. So we'll help as much as we can with that. Thank you very much, Graham. So, with that, I'd like to invite Richard Hodson to unmute himself and come and talk to us. And Richard is an insurance broker. He's very kindly volunteered to talk about some of the personal issues that he's faced. So Richard, would you like to share with us?
Yes, thanks, Steve. I suppose I'm 42 years old now, and grew up in an age, I was very lucky. Grew up in Yorkshire. Still got both my parents, and they were fairly hands-on. But it was an age of where mental health was never really considered. I was diagnosed with dyslexia at a very early age, and my first school told me there's no such thing as dyslexia. I was just stupid. And it was one of those things where people just brushed any non-physical ailments aside. It was never something which was thought of. You were told to toughen up and harden up, and it's not a problem. And I kind of lived my 20s and probably 30s like that, without really understanding the ups and downs which I found myself plagued with. I think Churchill used to refer to it as his black dog. And when I used to get down moments, I would throw myself into rugby or training or kind of going to the pub with the mates. And I kind of buried a lot of it, and didn't think it was ever an issue because we never talked that it was an issue. When I was living in Australia, I did a lot of work with, I started doing a lot of work with mental health charities. When I was with the rugby club, we got heavily involved in that, but that was just fundraising, and I was always there to say, come on guys, you can always talk about it, but never really expected anybody to talk about it, and nobody ever seemed to do it. So we continued. I continued slightly blasé without really kind of understanding it. Moved back from Australia almost 10 years ago now, and I've got married to my lovely wife. And we wanted to start a family, and we had a few issues trying to start a family. We had two miscarriages early on, and that was kind of a bit disturbing to start with. You don't go through that, but you learn, and you start talking to people, and that's when I started realizing that actually you can start talking to people. But then we've been lucky to have 2 children. But when my wife was pregnant with the 2 children, I became a nervous wreck. I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't focus. It was the process of picking my wife back up and just seeing how somebody you love and care about was so utterly destroyed by the miscarriages that I couldn't go through that again. So I became this kind of really nervous wreck through the process. And we had our first child, Imogen. She's now 6, doing well. Alfie came along 3 years later. But so post Alfie, I lost my way quite a bit in terms of I couldn't concentrate. I was struggling to get motivated for things. I felt permanently tired. And about August last year, I'd come home from work, and things hadn't been. It had impacted my work. I couldn't concentrate. I was not seeing things through. I was really struggling to commit to things. And I kind of came home, and Sarah had said something fairly innocuous to me. We ended up having a bit of a row. And I suddenly realised that actually I've had a short fuse for a bit. It's not the person I want to be. And I'm very lucky that my uncle-in-law was a psychiatrist. So I rang him and said, I think I need help. And it was good I did that, because October last year we were pregnant again, and unfortunately that didn't work out either. So everything kind of came to a head, and I was a mess. And I started to get some professional help, and I went to see a psychiatrist who's been brilliant, and it's been such a relief to be able to talk to people about these things, and somebody who's impartial. And it gave me confidence in myself that actually, wait a second, this isn't a problem different to anything else. This isn't a problem different to an illness. This isn't a problem different to economic hardship or anything. It's a problem, and all problems can be surmounted if you're willing to address them, work with people who can help you, listen. And one of the amazing things which I found is I was able to talk to people, talk to my friends, and mention things, and the reactions from my friends and from my family has been amazing. Excuse me. I was terrified. I thought if I was to mention this to somebody, my closest friends, they wouldn't be interested. They wouldn't care, because they're all a similar generation to me. It's just let's move on, toughen up, have a kind of cup of concrete, harden up. And actually, the reaction's been kind of the polar opposite to that, and everybody's kind of put an arm around you and encourage you to talk about it a lot more. So what's been the kind of revelation for me is that actually don't be afraid to turn around to a mate or to a friend or a family and say, I'm in trouble here. I'm really, really struggling to deal with that. Now, the opposite is also true to a very small extent still, unfortunately. When I raised it, we had a corporate event about a month after we lost our pregnancy in October. We had a directors meeting. And one of my fellow owners in the business, 65 years old, similar age to my father, basically just looked at me and told me to harden up. And just said, no, there's nothing wrong with you, you're just a bit lazy. I was in a mess at that stage anyway, because we'd lost a pregnancy, and I was grieving, but also I was also coming to terms with all my mental health issues as well. And I've had it marginally. There's people out there who've had it a lot worse. And so mine was anxiety. I would actually freeze. I would start to kind of just withdraw into myself, and I would go off and I would just disappear because I would get too frightened to engage with anything, engage with the problem. Even if there wasn't a problem, I could start creating my own problems. So, I think, whilst a lot of my mates, that kind of 40-year-olds have come to terms with that, I still think there's a generational gap. There's slightly older, and these are still the people who run a lot of the businesses in the UK. And I think there's a lot of knowledge that say that businesses can do a lot better. Lockdown has been. I've actually quite enjoyed lockdown. I did a lot of work from home. It's been great to have the kids around, do the drop-offs, do a bit of homeschooling. I've loved it. But I know a lot of people have struggled, and there will continue to be more isolation going forward. And it's going to have a big impact on people going forward. So I suppose my message is two things. One, don't be afraid to speak about it. Don't be afraid to turn around and say, I've got a problem to your mates. And also find independent help. It can be difficult to talk to a friend or family because you just don't know what their reaction is going to be. You're terrified that you're going to push somebody away. So go and find independent help. There's loads of people out there. I've been doing Zoom consultations with my psychiatrist. But also look out for others. I think that's very important. You know when someone is not right. You know when somebody's struggling. And it's equally as hard for you to reach out to somebody and say, are you okay? Because you're terrified. You can be terrified of them coming back and saying no. But be brave, and when somebody's struggling, to say, come on, how can I help? So I think the points are: look out for others, be willing to talk, and be willing to realise as a business owner or senior person in business that this can be serious, and we need to step up to the plate and help.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Richard. I think you're extremely brave to share that with us, but I think it's absolutely the right thing to do. I think from my perspective, there are so many things that cause stress, and how you deal with it is really crucial. So I think just by talking, it helps a lot. Particularly difficult, I think, for men, because men tend not to talk about these things. We tend to bottle it up and try and find a solution, the hunter-gatherers. But equally important for everyone. And it's not just about, stress for yourselves, I guess, in this particular time. It's thinking about employees and customers and what they're going through, and trying to look at it from different perspectives. When we had the business doctors on, they talked about the Cllr change curve. And, when great change occurs, and this is on top of the everyday stress that people have around, the normal things. The change curve is shock, denial, frustration, depression. Those are the first 4 stages that we go through. And that is all related to stress and can lead to mental health issues. And then we come out of it through sort of experimentation, making decisions and integrating back into the community. So I think all highly relevant. So thank you very much for that. There's some nice comments coming through for your sharing. I'm not going to put you through any series of questions, but clearly, we've done a lot of work with Elizabeth from A to I Dyslexia. And when I first met Elizabeth, and she gave me a presentation on how she's helping people and how she's, helping to assess people as to whether or not they have dyslexia, and the cost that some people are charging for this service, and they were doing it for, for a very small amount, and existing on, I think she was on about £20 a week as a wage from it. She was doing an absolutely brilliant job, but she absolutely had me in tears, because she said when she talked to people and they realized that they had dyslexia, it almost lifted a weight from their minds because they thought they were not normal, and the people were picking on them, teachers weren't listening to them. And I guess it's a lot better in this day and age where it's much more open. I think Prince William's doing a huge campaign to get people talking about mental illness, and it's not really an illness, really. It's kind of, you know, it's a state. So thank you very much for sharing. I'm now going to move on to, yes, sorry, Richard.
There's a causal link between dyslexia and depression as well.
I can imagine. Yeah. So I'm now going to ask Chris Dodd to come in and talk to us about some of the courses that might be able to help businesses. Chris, can I ask you to unmute and come on?
Thank you, Steve. Hello, everyone. I promise I talk quite briefly. Really building on when we spoke a couple of weeks ago in terms of what the college is trying to do whilst the official campus is shut. We're very keen to support the local business community in terms of, you know, moving towards, as they call it, the new normal. And I just want to talk about some of the things we're doing at the moment in terms of training around mental health and supporting the workforce and customers. So just a quick bit of context. I read this morning, Bupa have done a study that currently 1 in 7 Londoners are feeling stressed about returning to work. And obviously for all business owners, there's a big consideration here in terms of some staff may have been off for 12, 13, 14 weeks from the workplace. And I think that phase transition for everyone and customers involved is obviously causing quite a lot of anxiety locally and sort of across the city. So one of the things we're doing within the training we've been providing for local businesses is we've just launched a brand new course, and it's about mental health first aid. So it's about what support can be put into place for managers, it could be supervisors or business owners, or even, you know, general shop staff. And it looks at things like the causes of mental health concerns, some of the types. And the key thing with this, in terms of training we're providing, is looking at what practical ways you can support colleagues. Because obviously, and that's both physically and virtually, in terms of the way people will work in the future, there's a mindfulness actually sometimes, or those number of people have identified concerns about actually returning to the world of work. For some staff, there is real anxiety about staying at home for continued periods of time, and that can lead to loneliness and further anxiety. So it's looking very much about practical steps around what you can do within your business to support your staff and probably your customers as well, because I think a number of customers will be, you know, in terms of returning to retail, especially when hospitality relaunches, there will be concerns. People will feel anxious the first time they go out. So it's looking at some of the things that can be put in place to try and make that a smoother transition. I think the concerns and the worries will be there initially, and for some cases it will be ongoing. And a part of this training, this mental health first aid training, is actually, it's about the ongoing process. So where you do have, for some businesses on the call today, they may have staff they know for a long time have identified that they do have some mental health needs and in need of support, but maybe they've never had the tools or knowledge to do it. So it's really trying to sort of upskill people to be able to provide that support in what is going to be a very different way of working. And I think for a number of small businesses, this can be really beneficial because it can lead into sort of, CPD. This may be training that staff maybe wouldn't be able to previously access. The good thing with what we're doing is actually is free. So in terms of if there are any businesses who would like to put staff forward, and we've actually have some staff from the council at the moment for a number of the large organisations locally are doing different training. For anyone aged 19 plus, it is actually a free course to complete, and it's all done online. So there's obviously no need to attend the college at the moment. It's an online, a bit like the Open University. It's that type of model, but it looks at signs, triggers, symptoms, and it's all about giving people in sort of the business environment some of the skills that they need to hopefully do their job better. Because I think this is going to be a real priority, even more so as the economy starts to open up a bit more. So yeah, each course takes, we say, between 10 and 12 hours complete. We normally suggest 4 weeks. So it's not a huge undertaking. We're not asking, it's not going to take people a year or 2 years or 3 years. They're quite short courses, but the feedback we've had has been very beneficial. For example, on a different course that we do on autism, one of the major banks has been doing it. And actually now they're looking at the way they lay out their store, because a number of their customers, they've identified a potentially autistic, and they're looking at lighting and sort of the ergonomics of the place. So hopefully it really does add value to the way people do business and the way people are going to have to change in the future. So if anyone is interested, Steve, could you just put my email address in the comments, and then I'm happy to chat to people individually. But this is very much an ongoing offer as part of a broader range. So if this is a time when you are considering sort of, return to work, reopening, how you're going to support staff better, please do have a chat with me, because we've got a really broad set of options in terms of this free training we can offer. Thanks, Steve.
That's lovely. Thank you very much, Chris. It's a great resource, and when I send out the email with the recording, I will put the links from you on there, and supply your email address as well. So thank you very much for that. Alex, could I ask you to unmute yourself and come and talk to us? Alex is from the Mindful Compass, and is going to be talking about masks. So Alex, are you there?
Yep, can you hear me fine? Well, thanks, Steve, and actually particularly thank you, Richard. As was already mentioned, you've really helped set me up for my talk, because it is about the masks that we wear, and it's an easy one to start with, because we can just think about the physical masks at the moment that we see around us. So why do we wear physical masks? We've got the idea of protecting others with COVID-19. That's what the masks that we wear to the supermarkets are mainly doing. In sport, cricket, ice hockey, the goalies particularly, it's about protecting yourself. Sometimes it's about protecting your identity. If, say, you go on a march, but you'd rather not be known to have gone on that march, perhaps it's a bit sensitive at work or wherever that might be. And then there's the tribal masks around the world, power, virility, and even makeup could be considered as a way of covering up and looking to be just slightly different to who you are. So it leads me nicely onto the invisible masks, which is exactly what Richard was talking about. This, it's all fine when you break a leg and you've got a big cast on your leg. It's really easy. People can see, oh, poor you, you've hurt yourself. But when things are not comfortable in your mind, it's not always easy to see. It is if you really, really know somebody. My wife will always catch me when I'm feeling under pressure, and she'll try and make me talk about it. But in the sort of day-to-day, we don't take the time to necessarily notice that. So, what masks do we wear? We might wear a mask in the community. In this particular forum, you might have a reputation for being a really strong business leader. You might have a reputation for being a certain way. And so you have this mask on for a period of time while you're in with this particular set of people. You might have a mask online. So I know there's an option on Zoom to make yourself look more beautiful. Like, I haven't used it. I think I tried to look at it and I thought, wow, that is not me. I look completely ridiculous. But that's not to say that it's not useful for other people who need to feel, have a certain amount of a sense of their self-worth might be associated to the physical appearance. But also trolling, for me, is another mask we wear. You won't expect people to be walking around verbally abusing people in the street, but somehow that's what they do when they go online and they read people's posts on Facebook. So again, those are the kinds of things. But here today, the most appropriate for me is work. So that's what we're going to talk about in the most part. So if you're new to a company, new to a team, that's when you might put on a mask because you want to fit in. If you're part of a minority in so many different ways, so Richard mentioned dyslexia, any neurodiversity whatsoever. If you're a woman in a very male-oriented workplace, if you're a different race to the majority of your colleagues, if you have a sexual orientation that's not the norm, all of these are reasons you might want to wear a mask. And sadly, what that means is you have to be a little bit less like yourself. You have to reduce down an aspect which is an important integral part of your person, of your being, because you feel that it's not going to be accepted by the people around you. So other ones, particularly around work, are when things are tough at home. It might be just an argument with your wife, which could be a short-term thing, but it doesn't mean you're not going to feel that the next day. Or it could be a longer-term thing that just where things are not so easy. But how masks are affected is by company culture and by the example of the management. And again, Richard, thank you so much, but your co-owner telling you to harden up and that you're being lazy. I mean, I think we all took a step back from the laptop figuratively when we heard that, but that's unfortunately not unusual. So I'd kind of, if just as a quick reflection, if everybody on the call could just have a quick think about managers they've worked for, or bosses or owners, if it's not easy to do that, perhaps there's a teacher that you could think of from school days. So let's start with someone you did get on with, you know, ones where you really felt a connection, you felt you worked really well together. The chances are they were quite authentic, they were quite open about themselves, and you were able to connect with them. But the ones where my memories of the people that I just found so difficult to work for was that there was always something in between us. There was always a front, and it was impossible to pierce through that. So just see for a moment or two if there's anything that that resonates for you with that. We are drawn to sincerity. We're drawn to people who can be okay in their own skin, and to show a little bit of vulnerability, to show they aren't these perfect human beings, these amazing, I am a successful manager, I am a successful businessman, which is important in some aspects, but perhaps there are times and places for us to just let that fall away a little bit and show the person behind. So just to say that not all masks are bad, and in fact, so many of the masks that we wear are tremendously important. We wear these masks because we've had to survive. So similarly to Richard, my upbringing not encouraged to involve myself with my emotions. That was not something we were encouraged to sort of learn about. So you push them away, you push them away, you push them away. And that's how you get through school, perhaps. That's how you get through in being with some of your friends who are a bit more sort of physical or aggressive in nature. So it's important to have these masks to help us in certain circumstances. Sometimes it's just making life in general run smoothly. I'm not asking people to stop at the coffee machine and suddenly pour out, 5 years of difficulty. That's not going to be helpful for anyone, probably won't be helpful for you either, or for the person who's listening to it. So there are times when it's good to just say, yeah, I'm fine, and move on. But sometimes you need to keep what's private private. Sometimes you want to fit in, and sometimes, and I really, I don't want anyone to be opening up any really, really difficult mask. There is trauma. There is a really serious event in their lives that has had to be covered up so that they can cope, so that they can be a participant in life that they struggle to do so for so much time. But what's the impact of wearing a mask? So for me, there are a number of things you could talk about. So if you portray a certain you, that successful, that kind of maybe slightly more alpha, then what happens when you're not feeling so great? How do you ask for help? How do you come down from that particular representation of yourself to a point where you are open to seeing, okay, actually, I'm not quite where I want to be. How do I do that? Again, we talked about feeling tired. And if you are putting on this mask all the time, then it's taking up your energy just to be showing this face that you think you need to be showing up. It can therefore impact performance. And then especially we're talking about mental health. But I think for me, this whole subject is mental health. But yeah, very much if there is a big gap between who you are and this mask you feel you have to wear, then that's when there's this difficulty, particularly around the mental health. And isolation was another thing that Richard mentioned. It is something that stops you from connecting properly with those around you. And the other thing I thought would also be interesting to just observe is about time. So how much time do you need to wear your mask for? I think impacts the strength of that, sort of maybe the difficulty of the situation. So let's say I have an interview and I come in and the boss, the person interviewing me is really stone-faced. So like, okay, I really have to be a certain way in this interview. If that's half an hour, I come out, I'm probably a bit tired, but that's fine. If I then get the job and realize that persona that I gave in the interview is what they expect me to be for the rest of my working life in that job, then that's going to be truly, truly exhausting and truly, truly difficult for me to cope with. I also have personal experience of my wife caught cancer when my son was 1. And I didn't want to burden her with difficulties at work. I didn't want to burden work with difficulties at home. And there was nowhere really for me to talk, nowhere for me to take off the masks that I was wearing in those different circumstances, until I found, again, a bit, if you can find counseling, if you can find the right people to talk to. There's a breast cancer support group online, various places like that. It's about finding the relief, but sometimes this is just an example that is exhausting and really, really hard to cope on both levels when you've got having to do that at both sides. And I think just it's nice to come back to the physical mask, because I don't know how many of you, can I just see somehow, I can't see everybody, if you've worn a physical mask out and about in the shops at all, just have a hand in front of your computer. When you take it off, it's just a relief. It's just so nice to have it off. Like, personally, I'm like, oh, I didn't realize my breath was that bad. That's one of the things. And then just that sensation of taking it off after having it on for half an hour is that relief. And I think, again, you just bring that to these invisible masks that we have to wear, or we feel like we have to wear. Again, when you do get those moments in your day when you don't have to have it on, it feels the same. It's that sort of sense of, oh, okay, suddenly I can be more myself. So the last point I'd like to just share for now, and this is, you know, it's such a subject, so many parts of this you could just take off and do a whole workshop on. What can we do? How can we help either our colleagues, our families, our customers perhaps, to find ways to not have to wear their masks so often, or reduce the strength of their masks perhaps? And part of that is going to be our own work, is to realize the masks that we might be wearing and that might be having the impact on the others that we're working with, that we're living with, that we're interacting with when they come in to shop from us. Perhaps providing a space depending on your work. So is there somewhere in the office that could be a quiet space, or could you get someone in to host a session where people can, look at their masks and work out what they are, why they are, and do a little bit of work around that. Richard mentioned looking out for others. And I think words particularly have a real power to them. So my association with vulnerability for the majority of my life was weakness. Don't want to be vulnerable. No, don't let anyone see that you're vulnerable. That wouldn't be very helpful for anything. But actually, I've learned that vulnerability is being open. It's the opposite of isolation. So it's to do with availability and openness. Yes, it's a bit raw. Yes, it's a bit, you could be hurt, but the quality of your appreciation for even just the little things in life, when you're not stuck behind a mask or this armor that we feel like we have to wear, can be life-changing. It can just make a huge difference. So I'm going to leave it there for now. I don't know how long I was going, Steve, but I think we have Q&A later on. So if anyone has questions around anything to do with that, I'll be very happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Alex. It's kind of really helpful to look at it from that perspective. I know at the moment one of our outlets is we're watching the box set of Sopranos, and Sopranos is about an American gangster who is suffering from some sort of mental illness, and he goes to see a psychiatrist. But obviously, if the other gangsters find out he's seeing a psychiatrist, then it's big trouble. But just through that whole process, you can see that, even he, who feels like he needs to be in control, is seeing things in himself where he's ripping things off the wall and, really shouting at people, friends and family. And stress shows itself in so many different ways. And I guess the question I'm asking you, Alex, is, what's the best way to self-identify in yourself? Because knowing that you're in a situation where you need help is probably, pretty key. How do you know when you really need to go and seek help?
Yeah. So there are a number of exercises that I lead, which is, for me, there are clues. We get clues from physical sensations, we get clues from the way that the mind works, and we also get clues, if we're able to access them, from the emotional world. But we push so much of this away. Again, Richard mentioned, just no, I'll go and play rugby, no, I'll go and do something else. But so actually, I think it's finding a time to just actually be with yourself and accept everything that's coming up for a few minutes, to realize, okay, rather than watching another box set, which is great and a really important distraction, is a valid use. If we can find 5 minutes at a time every so often to just sit and really check in with ourselves, I think at that stage it'll be clear that there's something that we need to work with.
Well, thank you, Alex. And just finally, you run a series of courses for people. Would you just like to tell us about that? And I will provide the link when we send out the recording email.
Yeah, thank you. So I've literally yesterday put together probably about 18 different sessions, which are going to be more business focused, so similar to this mask one. But I have an ongoing series of drop-ins for anyone who does need or would like to try half an hour where they can completely remove all masks and just spend time with themselves. So these are typically maybe a different theme every day, but there are 4 different time slots throughout the day from first thing in the morning to 9:30 at night, so that there should be a time for most people to come and give them a try, and that you're welcome to try them for free. And then I just charge £20 for 20 sessions or up to 20 sessions, so 4 weeks. So it's about £1 each if you can make them all, or a few pounds each if you can make one in once every few days. Yeah, and I'll have my details in the chat as well for anyone who has any specific questions about that.
Thank you very much, Alex, and thank you to all of our speakers. I'd like to now throw it open for the Q&A. And the Q&A, you know, it could be questions about anything that the speakers have talked about. It might be something that you want to contribute to the discussion. I'll leave it up to you. So Marjan, I'm going to unmute you. You've had your hand up for quite a while. Marjan.
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, hi, good morning. First of all, before I start, I just want to say congratulations to Richard for being so honest, and seeing a man being so honest about his feelings is really, really, I mean, Richard, well done. It takes courage to be so honest. So well done for that. Sorry, my question actually is nothing to do with mental health. This is a question for Mr. Russell. This is about the discretionary grant. And I understand the government guidelines in regards to self-employed people to apply for it has changed. So since a couple of weeks ago, I understand the self-employed people can also apply for discretionary grant. I would like to get confirmation on that before actually I go ahead and fill all those forms and apply for it. And if there are anything else, because you see, my office is at home, I operate at office, but I also rent out facilities that I offer my services at the rented facility. So although I don't pay directly business rates, however, I also operate at other facilities. So would you like to be able to provide some insights into whether these are the criteria that it could make me eligible for applying for the grant, please?
I'll take the first point first about self-employed. The government originally said that anybody who was benefiting from the self-employed income support scheme would not be eligible for the discretionary grants, and that's what they changed. So even if you are in receipt of self-employed income support, you are eligible for the discretionary grant scheme. In terms of your personal situation, I would have to say that you would need to just complete the application. I don't know what the nature of the accommodation is that you're renting and so on, but I would advise you just to make an application and put the details on there so we can have a look at it.
Okay, and can I just also ask about, because I read it somewhere apparently in the borough of Hounslow, when they decided to divide the money equally to all businesses, they noticed that they only businesses end up getting about £60 each, those ones that they applied. Yeah, that's why. So I would like to know also about how you make a decision about, is it based on the turnover you provide the money? Is there any difference between different businesses?
Right, so when we were trying to design the scheme, Councillor Cook alluded to the fact earlier that we didn't really have a clear idea of how many businesses were going to apply. That's simply because the council doesn't have details of every single enterprise that operates within the borough. It has no need for that information on a day-to-day basis. So what we did, we designed the scheme to try and limit the applications. We've had 266 so far, so you can argue that's been successful. You can argue it we may have limited it too much. I mean, it's virtually impossible to know what's going to happen because we are operating in the dark with these schemes. We then, I mean, one of the problems we had is obviously we've got a fixed amount of money in Wandsworth for this scheme, which is just under £2.9 million. So if we pay equally to all businesses, if you get lots and lots of applications, they get a very small amount of money. If you get very few applications, they can get a very large amount of money, and everything in between. So what we're going to do is look at the businesses that apply when the applications are closed and we process them, and we'll take a decision then about how to distribute the money, because we were so unclear as to what types of businesses were actually going to apply and what their status would be, that we didn't feel we could actually set that out in advance.
So it's going to be, is it a safe assumption that it's going to be revenue based on the previous year?
I really couldn't tell you how we're going to go about that at this stage. I mean, what I would say is that with all the information that we're going to receive, most of that will be in a different format from everybody else's, so it's going to be quite difficult to actually analyse that in any great detail and with any degree of accuracy around what we are looking at. So I wouldn't have thought it would be based specifically on that particular item, but I can't say what it will be based on because I haven't seen the details of all the applications as yet.
Okay, and final question, sorry, one more. Is it going to be a taxable grant or is it tax-free?
The grants are taxable.
Taxable. Okay, thank you.
And yeah, Zaib, I don't know if you want to comment on the self-employed aspect and just share. But Graham, just a question for you. The discretionary grants, so the cut-off date is imminent.
Yeah.
How long do you think it will take you to go through the applications, and when will the first checks be coming out, do you anticipate?
Right, so we've had a small team working on the applications from day one. So I believe we're about a third of the way through what we've already got. We haven't got a huge number of staff, but we've got a small team working on it. So I would hope that we would be in a position to be discussing how we're going to distribute the money sometime next week.
Also, we just wanted to highlight that we've had a couple of members and businesses that have come through just in the last week or so and made cases, and James Cox in particular from the council have come back with some great responses and actually found a way to pay those grants. So thank you very much for that. Zaib, can you contribute anything to Marjan's request about self-employed?
Yes, I mean, it is a taxable grant. And secondly, I'll just share a scenario. There are many businesses who've only incorporated last year, so they were sole traders before. In order to qualify for the self-employed investment scheme, you need to have an intention to carry on as a sole trader as well. If you've incorporated a limited company and you've been trading in 2020 through it, but you were sole trader before, then principally you do not qualify for the grant. We've seen people applying for it, but we've also seen some guidelines and different articles in the press to say that the government will be requesting those grants back. So please, if you have incorporated recently and you were sole trader before and you've been directing your income into your limited company since you incorporated, then you do not qualify for it, even though when you log into your gateway on the HMRC portal, you will see that you are eligible. Thank you.
All right, lovely. So Baljinder, you had a question, so I don't know if you want to come in there in just a second, but first I was going to just ask Orestes from Business Doctors to just talk about the point that he's made and the comparison to Italy when considering opening up and taking care of staff and customers. Orestes, I'm just unmuting you to make that
Yeah, thank you, Steve, also for mentioning us before. The first thing I would like to do is to thanks, both Richard and Alex, because Alex talked about authenticity. That is a really, really important authenticity and self-awareness characteristic for entrepreneurs, I think, in the bounce back and recovery from COVID-19. And actually, Richard put it into practice, describing it, and this reminds me also of the importance of personal histories for entrepreneurs, because best businesses come out of situations of conflict, frustration, or the strive to want to improve something that is not optimal before. So it was really, really interesting. For what is concerning your question, well, what I have discovered with working with some clients, both in Italy before, because there are 2 weeks ahead in terms of opening, and then in the UK, is that really is very key that they try to find the balance between the business result they can realistically achieve, particularly in the next 6 months, because there are obviously limitations. And of course, the duty of taking care of employees, of customers in terms of risk assessment and health and safety. And one very interesting and relatively simple way of looking at it that I've applied is just to look at what is the impact from a financial viewpoint, in financial metric, non-financial or quantitative results in terms of customers, visits, occupancy, and also very, very importantly, of what is the perceived customer satisfaction during this transition, and understand very well this transition. So looking at things like social distancing measure, what is the impact on the business? If you need to have clients staggered shift or shift with personnel, provision of additional hand washing, for instance, or you need to implement pathways and signposting, screen barrier, all the impact that this has on the cost, that this has on the occupancy, on the capacity in terms of clients, and try to work out scenarios. And for what is concerning instead the customer experience is asking questions and trying to monitor the reaction in terms of your ideal clients. You could ask yourself that if my ideal clients in this situation are more uncertain of certain things, or maybe is not as good as before in doing a thing that is important to deliver my service, or maybe feel more frustration, anxiety, or stress about a certain characteristic of the delivery of my service or my product, or I need to become better in doing something in this new situation in order really to enjoy the full use of my service or my product. So combining the two things, then it's possible to also set up a sort of monitoring and measuring system that allows to work out maybe 1 or 2 scenarios, so that you have a solid base then to bounce back at the beginning of 21. Because for many people, and this again go back to self-awareness, authenticity, it will be important to really understand what are the limits and what they really can achieve in the next 6 months, so they can balance resource and results in the right way, and don't stretch too much maybe in certain areas, keep control on other ones. I had some very interesting experience recently in this in setting up this with some clients.
Thank you very much, Orestes. That's really helpful, especially to get a perspective on what's happening in Italy. I'm going to go to Baljinder. Baljinder, you have a question. I'm going to unmute you.
Thanks to all the presenters and of course, Steve, for you to bring up all the updates every week. Yes, I had got the answer for the question, and I already dropped an email to Graham, and I think it should be answered. I mean, just stay safe and keep healthy. And you're welcome to Quiznos. We are open from Monday, of course, and your lobsters is waiting for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Baljinder. Baljinder's opened up the first Quiznos in the borough, and absolutely amazing sandwiches. So I'd highly recommend that. Karen, I'm going to
shopping centre, just to remind the location.
Southside Shopping Centre, yes.
Thank you so much.
Lovely. If anyone else would like to ask a question, just click the raise your hand button. Seeing any more questions coming through, So probably a good point for me to just close the meeting on then. I'd just like to invite the speakers just to say a last few words just before we close. And whilst that's happening, if anyone does have a question, and I see the raised hand button, I will come to you. So Jonathan, would you like to make a closing remarks?
Well, I'd like to echo the thanks to Richard and what he said. Very, very brave. Thinking about the next few weeks of what we'll be doing, I think the key message is support your local neighbourhood. That I really hope a positive thing to come out of all of this is a renewed sense of identifying with where you live and supporting the businesses that are closest to you. And there are signs of that, really encouraging signs. So I just really encourage people to change behaviours, reinforce behaviours, and keep it that way. We've got some great businesses, and they deserve support.
Yeah, that's lovely. Thank you very much for that, Jonathan. I'm going to just take a question at the moment before we go on to Graham, just to say a last few words. And that's from Eleanor Merrick. I'm unmuting Eleanor, who's got some information for us. And Eleanor is from the University of Roehampton. And the university have very kindly sponsored all the costs for these Zoom meetings. And that's coming to an end soon. So if anyone else would like to take up that spot, or if Roehampton University would like to continue, there's always opportunity.
I'm sure we can, Steve. We'll have a chat about that. Yeah, it just struck me actually, and my colleague's been coming to these every week. I've seemed to have had no end of meetings, so I was really wanted to make sure I came today on the mental health, because for us and our students and our staff, it's been a big important thing as well. So thank you very much. First of all, I just wanted to let everybody know, many of you may not know, we have free £1,000 virtual internships that we still have on offer at the moment. It equates to about 95 hours of work, which could be done full-time or part-time. These are our new graduates who you can imagine are heading out post-degree into a really uncertain world. Actually, some of our second years may do that as well. Range of disciplines. We still have quite a lot of funding available for this. So if you're interested, Steve, how should we do this? I mean, we have our internships at roehampton.ac.uk email address. But if there's a way perhaps that my email address could be shared, I'd be really happy to see if we can help SMEs in the borough.
I think that's an absolutely fantastic offer. If you send me details, I'll put it out on an email to businesses and on the website. I think, using internships is just so good for businesses and for the students, because they do bring a fresh perspective. And their eagerness is just absolutely amazing. We've done a fair bit of work with the students at Roehampton University, and I'm just always blown away by the ideas that come out and the enthusiasm. So thank you, Eleanor. I'm going to, Jane Harris has got her hand raised. So Jane, I'm just going to unmute you for your question.
Hi, Steve. Thank you for taking my question. I'm one of those people and businesses that's falling between all of the cracks and seem to be ineligible for funding from anywhere. So my question for you is this: is there one resource available where I and other people can go to find out what grants are available? Thank you.
It's a great question, because obviously there are grants around apart from what's being offered through the COVID scheme. Can anyone else of our speakers help me out with a good signpost? Yes.
Steve, in terms of resource, if you go onto gov.uk on their COVID-19 pages and go through to the support for businesses, there is a business support finder function on the gov.uk. Where you can try and find what support is out there. Though I appreciate, we very much understand that there are a lot of businesses for whom support isn't out there, and that's something that Councillor Good has written to the government on a number of occasions. But that's the best place to try and find out if there has been any, if there is any support available, and particularly if there's anything been added in recent days or weeks.
May I chip in as well, Steve?
Yes, Oreste.
Yeah, thank you, Jane. There is a resource that we offer that you can look at. It's called swoopfunding.co.com. I can send you a link. Essentially, it's a broker that where you can have the assistance of a person. This person will talk to you, and then he will look across many financial institutions to understand if there is anything that they may find, because there is actually something new almost every week, even at regional levels or in different functional or sectors coming out. And it's very difficult, without knowing information about your business, if you are eligible or not. But I would say, without guaranteeing anything, that is worth to get in touch with this one, because maybe something may come out. It will not cost anything to you, because in the case they find a facility for you, they will get the fee from the provider. So it's worth giving a try. If you share your email, I will send you the link.
Thank you very, very much, Oreste. I will privately message you now with my email.
Thank you.
All right, that's lovely, and thank you, Oreste. Yes, you reminded us we did have the CEO of Swoop on one of these forums a few weeks back, and it is a very good resource. I guess, Jane, you're looking for grants as opposed to loans.
That is absolutely right, Steve. Actually, Oreste, I can't privately email you, so maybe I will send my email address to Steve, and he can send it on to you.
Fair enough.
Thank you. Yes,
That's
I'm
okay.
Not for loans. Thank you.
All right. Lovely. And Jane, we really do feel for you. And I think I'd just like to say that Councillor Cook was talking about some of the good things that are coming out of this pandemic. And from the Chamber point of view, one of the really good things that's come out is that we are working together with the other London chambers and forming a partnership with London Chamber of Commerce. So London Chambers is the largest Chamber of Commerce in London. Before this, we all worked independently, really, but now we are coming together and we're feeding into London Chamber, and they are having meetings with government, with ministers, with the Mayor of London, and putting forward cases. And very high on the agenda are businesses like yours that are falling through the cracks. We don't understand why, but I guess, until resources put into that, as a business, we have to think about how we can survive. So thank you for your question.
Thank you for taking it. And if you want to contact me privately, please do, Steve, in terms of helping ascertain the cracks that businesses do fall into.
I will do. One thing that we do with London Chambers to put out their survey every Monday, and they collate the responses by Thursday. It's very short, and the questions do change from week to week as the situation changes, but they really do pull that all together and then take that forward into their key stakeholder forums. So thank you for the contributions. So I'm not seeing any more hands raised, and I'm going to just ask Graham Russell to just say a few closing remarks. Graham.
Thanks, Steve. Just to say, I've just requested that the closing date be pushed back by 24 hours. So the closing date for the discretionary scheme will now be 5 p.m. on Friday rather than Thursday, because there appeared to be some confusion about the date there. So that's now Friday at 5 p.m. So if you know of anybody who hasn't applied, please get them to apply. And if you yourself haven't applied, please make your application. We will get those processed as quickly as we can and get the money out as quickly as we can after that.
Thank you very much, Graham. Zaid, would you like to, and Martin Pocock, Zaid first, would you like to just say anything?
Yes, wanted to update on the bounce back loan as well. As we understand, Metro's portal is all open and they're accepting the applications very smoothly. I'll reach out to some of the service businesses in the borough I know, and I'll let them know about the extension of this discretionary fund. Apart from it, we know furlough changes are coming in. So please, if anybody has any inquiry, I'll leave the email address, just give the reference for Wandsworth Chamber, and our payroll department will advise you accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Zoe. Martin, and then Steve, if you wanted to say a few words. Martin.
Yeah, hi Steve. I think it's really good to highlight the mental issues because I think a lot of people have been working from home and will struggle to get back to work. I think people are going to be scared to get back to work. So I think employers, I was listening to an employment seminar, and yeah, I think the employers are going to have to be very sympathetic actually to employees coming back to work. So I think it's great that you've highlighted that issue.
Lovely, thank you very much, Martin. Steve Diamond, we had not a question really, but market traders aren't applying for these discretionary grants, and there must be lots of other businesses. Is there any comment you can make about how we can perhaps get to them before Friday?
Yes, well, I think we're being pretty proactive with the market traders, certainly in Tooting, which has the biggest concentration in the borough. So we certainly got word out to the market operators and the businesses that are there. I think we have had quite a few applications from what I understand. I think perhaps some of the market traders are actually trading relatively successfully. So they'll need to make a choice as to whether they want to apply for the loan. And also you do need to provide some evidence that you've been impacted by COVID-19. So actually some, like some businesses that are doing reasonably well at the moment, some market traders are doing very well, but hopefully those that have been impacted have got the message and are putting it in. In the meantime, we're endeavouring to get word out through our own channels, through our newsletter, through social media. I think just echoing what Graham said, some businesses who could potentially benefit from this are not ones that we have contact with. So we're trying to use whatever networks we have. But certainly, if you're aware of businesses that would be in a position to apply for this, then I think the message is that there's funding available, and people should seriously consider this, because I think we can get reasonable levels of grants out.
That's great. Thank you very much.
I just wanted to very quickly follow up as well on what Councillor Cook at the very top of the meeting said, that on the hospitality reopening, we are working very closely within the council with our regulatory services teams, planning, community safety and others, because we realise this is really important. And we will be arranging a webinar that will be putting out to the hospitality context with speakers from police, from licensing and so on and so forth. Guidance is a bit short on the ground, but we are preparing locally for that, and we do want to have close contact with businesses as the 4th of July approaches. So if anyone is interested in that, then either usually contact yourself or leave a message on the chat, and I'll pass it on to those that are organising that.
Thank you, Steve. I guess one of the big issues for bars and restaurants opening is, if the 2 metre rule isn't reduced to 1 metre, it doesn't really become viable, because they can't get enough customers in, and so it's not profitable. It's being raised quite often for us, but I guess that's not in your gift, and we're just waiting on the government for that. But I hope in the seminars you'll be able to help businesses and address that issue.
Yes, that's precisely one of the areas of uncertainty that we're all having to work with. But I think close collaboration is really the most important thing, so that as and when we get details coming through, we can make sure we get the best solution on the ground for businesses, customers, and also residents as well.
Okay, so before I just go to our guest speakers, Emma Maddick, you've got a question. I'm just unmuting you. Emma, would you like to ask your question?
Sorry, yes. It's not related directly to my business, but it's a community related thing. I've been helping the charity For the Love of Scrubs in southwest London, that currently located in St Mary's Church Hall in Putney. They need to vacate the premises and they're looking for temporary premises in Wandsworth within the borough. So I was just wondering really if anyone knows of any unused commercial space, office space that might be available for them to temporarily occupy whilst they're sewing scrubs for the NHS.
Okay, Emma, that's, again, if you can send me details of that, I'm happily put that out in one of our emails, but thank you for sharing that.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Will do.
Lovely. So, Richard, did you want to make a few last remarks? And thank you very much once again for sharing your story. Richard Hodson.
I think I can only share from personal experience, but I started reading a book a while ago, the Chimp Paradox. I think quite a lot of people have read it, but I've found that a very good book for self-reflection in terms of why you kind of act the way you do, and possibly it comes as what Alex was saying about masks as well. But if anybody wants to have a good book to read and try to understand some of their compulsions, The Chimp Paradox by Professor Steve Peters, I think it is. I would recommend. That's helped me a lot.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Richard. And Chris Dodd, you may have left the room. Alex, would you like to just say last remarks?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. I've copied some links into the chat just briefly. This is the gentleman whose talks inspired the looking into masks. His name's Ashanti Branch. So the YouTube is only, the TED talk is only about 8 minutes. It's quite quick and easy. If you fancy, and I think we're all being sort of drawn to step outside of our comfort zone with all the things going on around the world at the moment. There's the film, which is on YouTube below, which is The Masks We Live In, which looks at young men, particularly in America, but I think it's the same for a lot of people, the way we have to wear these masks just to feel like we can get through the early days of life. So have a look.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Alex. Jane Harries, you just raised your hand. I'm going to unmute you to ask you a question.
Hi again. It was actually in response to Emma Maddox's question. Have you tried some of the larger restaurants and the gyms, etc.? So basically businesses that are unable to open at the moment. And for example, if it was a large restaurant, obviously they've got table and chairs where your sewers could sit.
Yes, no, thanks, Jane. That's a good idea. They are currently in talks with the Bank of England club potentially to use their squash courts, but there are no toilet facilities there. So, but I will look into some other venues such as the gyms and maybe some bigger restaurants. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so lovely. So I'm going to close this meeting and say thank you to all of our speakers. I think it was really insightful, extremely brave of Richard, and extremely informative. We will be hosting another session next week. I would really like to get the town centres and the bid managers coming forward and telling us what they're doing locally. So perhaps we'll arrange that for one of the future meetings. For now, please read your Business Connections magazine. If you haven't got a copy, I'll happily send you one if you send me an email. And just stay safe. So thank you very much for attending.